Hello friends, welcome to a new topic today. In this chapter we are going to learn about epistaxis. So in the epistaxis first we should learn about the Little's area or Kesselbeck's epistaxis. Kesselbeck's area. So this Little's area or Kesselbeck's area is the most common site of epistaxis in children and young adults. In children and young adults, it is the most common site of the epistaxis. So where is it located? This Little's area is located in the antero-inferior part of the nasal septum. So this is located in antero-inferior part of the nasal septum. Okay, that is Little's area or Kesselbeck's area. It is also called as anterior epistaxis. In this Little's area or Kesselbeck's area, we have anterior ethmoidal artery, sphenopalatine artery, which is also called as artery of epistaxis. Then we have septal branch of greater palatine artery and also septal branch of superior labial artery, which is a branch of facial artery. So all these will take part in this Kesselbeck's plexus. Okay, then we have one more type which is called as, there is something called as Woodruff's plexus also. So what is this Woodruff's plexus? This Woodruff's plexus is located in the inferior, in the lateral nasal wall. See, here Little's area is in the anterior most part of nasal septum. It is in nasal septum. But this Kesselbeck's plexus, this Woodruff's plexus is present in the nasal wall. It is present in lateral nasal wall, inferior to the posterior turbinate, posterior end of inferior turbinate. It is number 1 present in lateral nasal wall, that is inferior to posterior end of posterior turbinate. It is mainly present in lateral nasal wall, inferior to posterior end of posterior turbinate. Okay, so this is about the Woodruff's plexus. The artery which is involved in Woodruff's plexus is mainly the sphenopalatine artery and posterior pharyngeal artery are involved in the Woodruff's plexus. Sphenopalatine artery and posterior pharyngeal artery is involved in Woodruff's plexus. Then we have the next is about there is one more area which is called as, we have something called Brown's area. This Brown's area is located at the nasal septum. This is located in nasal septum, Brown's area. Okay, then we have also one more thing which is also called as retrocolumnar vein. If you see, the artery most commonly involved or artery of epistaxis is sphenopalatine artery. Then what is the vein of epistaxis? Vein of epistaxis is retrocolumnar vein. So most common site of venous bleeding in younger patients less than 35 years is retrocolumnar vein. Okay, next we will learn few points about epistaxis. So in epistaxis, if you see, epistaxis is of two types. One, we have anterior epistaxis. Second, we have posterior epistaxis. Anterior epistaxis is present anterior to pyriform aperture. Okay, anterior epistaxis is present anterior to pyriform aperture, whereas posterior epistaxis is present posterior to pyriform aperture. So in epistaxis, anterior epistaxis is present anterior to pyriform aperture, posterior epistaxis is posterior to pyriform aperture. So posterior epistaxis can be from the wall, lateral wall, can be from the septum, or it can be in the nasal floor bleeding also, can be called as posterior epistaxis. Next, we have one more classification of epistaxis, in which epistaxis can be divided into childhood epistaxis, where the age of the child should be less than 16 years, or we can call it as adult epistaxis, where the age of the adult is more than 16 years. In less than 16 years, we call it as childhood epistaxis. If it is more than 16 years, then we call it as adult epistaxis. Okay, then we have one more type of epistaxis, which is, we have primary epistaxis and we have secondary epistaxis. Okay, in primary epistaxis is present in 70 to 80% idiopathic. Primary epistaxis is seen in 70 to 80% or idiopathic cases, whereas secondary epistaxis is seen in trauma, surgery, or whenever there is overdose of anticoagulants, we see secondary epistaxis. See, primary epistaxis is seen, it is idiopathic, whereas secondary epistaxis is seen in trauma, surgery, overdose of anticoagulants. In them we see secondary epistaxis. So what is the differences between primary and secondary epistaxis? This is important. So if you see primary epistaxis, it is mild and it is anterior epistaxis most commonly. Secondary epistaxis is mostly posterior and it is severe epistaxis and might require hospitalization also. See, primary epistaxis is anterior and it is mild epistaxis, whereas secondary epistaxis is posterior and it is severe epistaxis requiring hospitalization. In primary epistaxis is most common, whereas secondary epistaxis is less common. So primary epistaxis is more common and secondary epistaxis is less common. Primary epistaxis, you see blood flows out of from the front of the nose. In primary epistaxis, blood flows out from the front of the nose, whereas secondary epistaxis, obviously it is posterior, so blood trickles back of the nose. Primary epistaxis, most common site is Little's area because it is anterior, whereas secondary epistaxis, most common site is posterior superior part is most common. Primary epistaxis, that is idiopathic, occurs mostly in children and young adults. In children and young adults, you see primary epistaxis. Secondary epistaxis is seen in age group more than 40 years, you see secondary epistaxis. Okay, primary epistaxis is seen in children and young adults. Secondary epistaxis is seen in adults more than 40 years of age. Primary epistaxis, the most common cause of primary epistaxis is trauma. The most common cause of secondary epistaxis is mainly spontaneous, it occurs spontaneously, where hypertension and atherosclerosis is the most common cause of secondary epistaxis. Most common cause of secondary epistaxis can be spontaneous, or it can be hypertension, or atherosclerosis is the most common cause of secondary epistaxis. Then first we will learn about the important points about epistaxis in children. Okay, epistaxis in children is actually most commonly seen between the age group of 3 to 8 years, and this epistaxis is most commonly seen in winter months, that is due to increased upper respiratory tract infections or due to drying effect. Due to increased upper respiratory tract infections or due to drying effect, so we see epistaxis mostly in winter. Then most common site of epistaxis in children is anterior part of nasal septum is the most common site, because nasal mucosa is thin in the anterior part of nasal septum and it is easily exposed to dry currents. The most common site of epistaxis is Little's area. The most common cause of epistaxis is idiopathic. It can be idiopathic or sometimes it can be due to digital trauma or nose pricking in the Little's area. It can be due to idiopathic or sometimes it can be due to digital trauma or due to nose pricking in the Little's area, or it can be due to crusting. Okay, so in the epistaxis in children, you can have unilateral epistaxis in children. Whenever there is unilateral epistaxis, especially in children, we will have to rule out the foreign body, which is very important. Unilateral epistaxis in children, if you suspect, you will always have to rule out the foreign body. Then what are the causes of recurrent epistaxis in children? The causes of recurrent epistaxis in children include these are the following causes of recurrent epistaxis in children, which include allergic rhinitis, retained foreign body, or hemorrhagic disease like idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura or von Willebrand disease, angiofibroma, nasal myosis, use of nasal sprays, especially intranasal steroid sprays, vascular abnormalities like AV malformation or hemangioma. So all these are the causes of recurrent epistaxis in children. Then what about the adult recurrent epistaxis? Adult recurrent epistaxis, the most commonly that in the adult recurrent epistaxis, secondary causes are most commonly seen in adult recurrent epistaxis. Here this is associated with liver disease, kidney disease, leukemia, whereas myelosuppression is associated with adult recurrent epistaxis. Always look for either if there is any, the causes we will see. The causes are, we have coagulopathy is the main cause. It can be due to some coagulopathy. This coagulopathy is mainly due to liver disease or kidney disease, leukemia or myelosuppression can result in coagulopathy, thus leading to recurrent epistaxis. Other causes like trauma, surgery, post surgery, or patient on warfarin, okay, or if there are any tumors like juvenile nasopharyngeal angiofibroma or hemangiopericystoma, or if the patient is suffering from hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasias. So in all these conditions, recurrent nasal epistaxis can occur in adults. What is the most common cause? If you were asked what is the most common cause of epistaxis in adults, the most common cause of epistaxis in adults is hypertension, and the most common site of epistaxis in adults is Woodruff's plexus. Most common cause of epistaxis in adults is hypertension, whereas most common site of epistaxis in adults is Woodruff's plexus. Then whenever there is epistaxis, what should you do? The first method, first we should do first aid. In the first aid, you should ask the person to pinch the nose. If he pinches the nose, first he will have to made sit with a cork between the teeth, and you will allow him to bleed. Okay, first you will ask the person to pinch the nose, okay, and you will have to ask him to open the mouth. So as a result, all the blood which he which is going out post nasal trickling of blood, that will be that will come out of his mouth. Okay, so that is Trotter's method. And we also I have to ask the person to apply ice cold water to face and head, because ice, whenever there is cold water, cool temperature will obviously cause vasoconstriction. So in first aid method, we can ask the person to apply ice cold water to face and head. Okay, then what about the treatment in hospital? So if you see in hospital, you have you can first in the hospital, you can, in order to decrease the anxiety, you can give pethidine to decrease the anxiety. Then you have anterior nasal packing. You can do anterior nasal packing. In anterior nasal packing, you can pack the nose. Nose is packed with a rubber gauze. You can pack the nose with a rubber gauze like this, and then this rubber gauze should be soaked in Neosporin antiseptic ointment for 24 to 48 hours. The rubber gauze, you should pack the nose with a rubber gauze which is soaked in Neosporin antiseptic cream for 24 to 48 hours. Then there is one more alternative which is called as Merocel pack, is an alternative which can be used. This is about anterior nasal packing. Then we also have one more type which is called as balloon tamponade can be used. Balloon tamponade is an alternative to nasal packing. In the balloon tamponade, in this we have a side port. So this is the side port, this is the anterior balloon which is present, this is the posterior balloon, and this is the airway tube. With the help of balloon packing, the patient can even take the respiration also. So this has two balloons, one it has anterior balloon and the other it has posterior balloon. So we can even use this balloon tamponade effect. Then we have something called as posterior nasal packing. So what do you see in posterior nasal packing? Here in posterior nasal packing, the side effects of posterior nasal packing include, mainly we have CVS side effects are seen in the posterior nasal packing, like it increases the chances of pulmonary hypertension, cor pulmonale or sleep apnea. The side effects like or complications like pulmonary hypertension, cor pulmonale or sleep apnea are associated with this posterior nasal packing. I will show you the picture of posterior nasal packing, just a minute. So if you see, this is the posterior pack. Here this is the anterior pack which we have, this is the posterior pack which you can see. Okay, that is posterior nasal packing can also be done. Then we have vessel ligation. Even after doing posterior nasal packing, if it does not subside, then you can do vessel ligation in uncontrollable bleeds. So how do you do this vessel ligation? Which vessels are ligated? That is important. We can ligate the external carotid artery, can be ligated. Actually, ligation of external carotid artery is the operation of choice, especially in elderly debilitated patients in anterior epistaxis. So external carotid artery is the operation of choice in elderly and debilitated patients in anterior epistaxis. So if you see, indications are this external carotid artery, here you see, here there will be bleeding from external carotid artery is the main indication for external carotid artery ligation. But here, if all the other measures are failed, remember it should be done only and only if anterior nasal packing, posterior nasal packing and balloon tamponade, all the effects are failed, then you can do this external carotid artery ligation. So where is the site of this external carotid artery ligation? This is important. This external carotid artery is ligated above the origin of superior thyroid artery. Just above the origin of superior thyroid artery, you should ligate the external carotid artery. Then the next ligation is we have maxillary artery ligation. This maxillary artery ligation is mainly performed in the posterior bleeds. It is done in pterygopalatine fossa by Caldwell-Luke approach. So this maxillary artery ligation is done in pterygopalatine fossa by Caldwell-Luke approach. Okay, then but what is the ligation method of choice? If you see, the ligation method of choice is TESPAL, which is transnasal endoscopic artery ligation is the ligation method of choice. Ligation method of choice is we have something called as TESPAL, which is transnasal endoscopic sphenopalatine artery ligation. Then we also have one more, which is we have anterior and posterior ethmoidal artery ligation can also be done. So in anterior and posterior ethmoidal artery ligation is done between the inner canthus of eye and midline of nose. Between the inner canthus of eye and the midline of nose, you can do this anterior and posterior ethmoidal artery ligation. Then in the epistaxis, one more important thing which is seen in epistaxis is hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia. What is this hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia? In the anterior part of nasal septum, we have this hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia, where the patient comes with the recurrent episodes of profuse bleeding, and the patient has telangiectasia, that is dilated blood vessels are seen in the anterior part of nasal septum. So the treatment in this cases is you can use KTP, Nd:YAG laser or septodermoplasty can be done for these patients. Okay, so this is about hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia. So thank you guys for watching my lecture. In the next class we will do one more topic. Thank you.